Welcome to What's Possible, ABM Expert Panel Series, where we bring the experts of ABM to talk to you about the future of facilities, the latest trends, and technologies. I'm Alex Freidin, Vice President for Corporate Strategy at ABM, and today we're here to talk about artificial intelligence, or AI. AI is no longer a futuristic concept. It's here, and it's shaping how we work and live every day. It powers everything from the use of our cell phones to fraud detection, and increasingly, it's powering our facilities. And across facilities, AI is predicting equipment failures. It's optimizing energy use. It's deploying teams more effectively, and it's improving occupant experience. It's shifting operations from reactive to proactive. And nearly a quarter of clients today are embedding AI into their facilities. And for the larger ones, we're seeing more than half of them embedding AI into their facilities. And vendors and clients alike are experimenting with how AI can improve their decision-making and analytics. Today, we're going to explore what this means in a practical and real-world sense and what's coming up on the horizon. I'm fortunate enough to be here with two of my esteemed colleagues who are experts in the field. First, we have Bob Clarke, Head of ABM Client Experience and Operations Support, and Kayla Oliver, Head of Innovation. Welcome to you both. Let's start broad. I hear a lot about AI, and when I was talking with both of you, let's say 9 months ago, about what AI was about, it's completely different today. And in 9 months from now, it's going to be completely different. And then I would say on top of that, Kayla, some people actually don't really know what AI means. They hear about it all the time. So why don't you start us off? Give us an overview of what this is about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that I like to describe AI is just computers doing things that we thought formerly humans had to do. And I know that's a very broad definition, but it's kind of intentionally broad because AI is actually quite a broad technology. The other thing that I like to clarify is that AI isn't new. It's this unique thing where it's not a new technology, but it's still emerging just because it's maturing so quickly. But for decades, we've had a type of AI called machine learning. And you can think of machine learning as just a computer model that takes historical data and then is able to predict outputs. So it creates or finds patterns between inputs and outputs. And why I like to talk about that is because it highlights that AI is in some ways a prediction technology. You feed it tons of data and it finds patterns and then predicts what the output will be. And that same general concept, and I'm oversimplifying it, but that same general concept has been applied in new ways, like generative AI. It's tons and tons of data around language or pictures where now it can predict the next word. And when applied in the right way, that gets us to the chatbots we see today. And that also gets us to some of the recent maturations we've had, like Agentic AI. And Agentic AI sounds super fancy, but it just means AI working more and more autonomously to drive towards a task. So long story short, AI is models that are fine-tuned to do something. And what that something is quite broad, but AI is a broad technology.
Where have you seen some of the biggest shifts in the past 9 months in just AI?
I think the biggest one, and it's such a buzzword, but it really is Agentic AI. And it's a buzzword for a reason. It's one of those funny things where there's hype around it. People use the word too much, but it really is powerful. So a year ago, the conversation was everything needs to be human in the loop. And now how much can be done before the human becomes involved is just much greater. So now Agentic AI can actually coordinate a lot of what we call virtual agents. So things that are specific to go do X task. And so Agentic AI can coordinate a bunch of virtual agents getting you 95% of the way, where before it might have gotten you to 20%, then you got involved, then you maybe used a different AI model for something else. Now all of that can be coordinated in the back end, gets you to 95%.
I hear about AI in the news daily, how it improves productivity, how it is thinking about the what's next, Kayla, like you were just mentioning. But how does it work with a facility? When I think about a school, a commercial office building, a manufacturing plant, how does it connect there? So Bob, let me turn it over to you. Where does it play in with a facility?
Well, I like to frame it around 3 Ps. Is it predictive?
Yeah.
Kayla talked about patterns. Are we looking at different patterns and algorithms in the building to see how the building behaves? Or are we improving a process? So if you think of predictive patterns and process, and you think in terms of the building, think about how we can be more predictive in terms of the population of the building, okay? And then the population triggers how you're gonna manage the HVAC system and the energy system, okay? So historically, you'd heat a building or cool a building based on the temperature, right? Not based on the population and the use case of the building, right? Things like understanding predictive failures on your assets. So vibration analysis in terms of, in the old days, you have your engineers running around and checking assets. There were no sensors. You had BMS systems, IWMS systems. But now, with sensor technology and taking those algorithms and understanding how that machine behaves or how that asset behaves, now you can forecast out cost modeling in terms of, okay, what's the failure rate on that asset? What does the maintenance program look like on that asset? How long, what's the uptime prediction on that asset? Based on the population of the building, how often do I clean the building, right? So if you remember COVID, there were not a lot of people in the buildings. Now, post-COVID, you've got return to work, but the return to work is somewhat hybrid. They may be 3 days a week, 1 day a week. Do you need to clean the building the full time during the week, or can you redeploy your assets and redeploy your staff utilizing a demand management model, which will help in terms of driving costs down and being more predictive in terms of how you're using your staff and labor. So, I mean, those are some very simple ones. You've got chat box technology to be able to help the client experience in terms of being able to help your tenants, your students, your employees, engage better with the building in terms of needs that they may have. So the use case is vast in terms of what you can help do to drive predictability, but also have an impact on process in taking steps out of process, removing waste, also facilitating a better predictive analysis, and then understanding the patterns of how facilities operate to drive efficiency.
Great. Kayla, when you're a visitor to one of these buildings, a visitor to commercial real estate, you're a student at a school, or you're a factory worker at a manufacturing plant, where are you seeing AI in those facilities?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I'm going to piggyback on what Bob said. I think it's really about shifting from reactive to very demand-based. And I want to be clear, I mean, you both have heard me say this way too many times. This is not new that facilities are heading towards an ecosystem of data. In many ways, they already are. And traditional data and analytics helped us use that data, but AI just makes it so much more powerful. So when we think about that shift from reactive to very demand-based on hard services, that looks like predictive maintenance. Bob was talking about a little bit of that earlier. And what's powerful is with AI, you can just take so many different data sets and see all these unknown patterns. So then you're able to see how this flight that's coming in impacts occupancy, plus weather impacts when the asset will need to be maintained. And then on the soft services side, same concept. We're able to see patterns between things like when the water filter may be out of service, plus flight delays. and then really make sure that when we think about restrooms, we're servicing at the exact right point in time. And I used 2 airport examples there, but that same concept of shifting to demand-based is really where I see it coming to life in facilities.
So what I'm hearing is from both of you is clients are starting to see the value of AI in their facilities to improve their tenant experience, guest experience, maintaining and predicting improvements to their critical assets, and just, I would also say, just general productivity savings. Bob, when did you start to see AI jump from a hype to reality?
Over the last 5 to 10 years, I would say. And clients have always pushed you to be predictive. And I'll give you a real example in terms of outside the client space. But if you think about the weather and you think about tornadoes, they could give more warning to people to get safe. So then they were throwing up, technology into the tornadoes to be able to get the algorithms to say, okay, if we can add 5 more minutes to the predictability, right, then we can make people more safe. So conceptually, how do we predict the behavior of a building that's translated from, if you think about using human capital to be a form of AI, we used to have to take counts, how many people were in the building. You used to have engineers doing their...
On a clipboard?
On a clipboard, rounds and readings, right? So how do we do the rounds and readings with engineers? Kayla mentioned aviation. Airplanes are coming in. You're predicting how many people are on those planes so that we can deploy wheelchairs for the passengers. If there is a weather change, now you've got to redeploy that labor based on that demand. So in aviation, we've been using that technology for a number of years, whether it was through beacons. Now you're using more AI as it relates to the wheelchair asset in our PRM services. But aviation is a great example because with artificial intelligence, now you can look at, okay, we know the first week of August in Atlanta, it's going to be a high storm environment.
Sure.
Therefore, it makes sense to staff up because you're going to have delays and we're going to have to redeploy. And I'm just using Atlanta as an example, but pick any city, but bring more predictive and leveraging AI to say, and I use the word being more intuitive about the behavior of the weather, the behavior about passengers. What happens when 1,000 passengers come out and they run right to a restroom? Okay, you've got this many flights coming in at this particular time. So this has been around for a while. So I would say probably, over the last 10 years, I think the hype becomes, now it's expanding more into other areas. And so people were using AI without even thinking they were using AI.
So Kayla, Bob said the word hype, and you read in the news, that word comes up. So is it a hype? I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
How I like to talk about this is the technology itself is not a hype. The technology is real. Where there is some hype is in the reaction around the technology. So whether you think about that from an investment standpoint or just interest standpoint. But this is not new to AI. Whether different people have different opinions about this cycle, but Gartner has a hype cycle for a reason. With any new technology, there's just this period of, oh my gosh, this is awesome and it's gonna solve everything. And that was the period we were in with AI for a little bit. Everyone wanted AI just to have AI. So there was a reaction to the maturation of AI that was hype, but the technology isn't hype. And what I'd say has been great over the past year is I think we've shifted out of some of that hype phase where people really understand how to deploy AI in a way that makes a difference. And that is one of my other favorite phrases, which is technology is only 20% of the battle. The other 80% is people and process. That's become a big part of the understanding over the last year is those algorithms that Bob talked about, those are awesome, but they mean nothing if you don't embed them in how you work. So if you're still operating on a schedule-based system, all those algorithms are going to do nothing. So you do have to change the way you work to embed AI or the outputs of AI. And that's where I think we've shifted away from the dynamic of hype around AI.
Bob, I want to get more tactical on how we're actually seeing this in facilities today. So you talked about how AI is helping propel the aviation industry. Where else are you seeing this in your role in client experience and operations support, where that AI application is moving into standard operating procedures?
So when you think just on soft services, primarily janitorial,
Okay.
Automatic scrubbers, automatic vacuums, once it learns the pattern and learns where the key areas are, it can become more efficient the more it learns and the better it cleans. When someone pays for a cleaning contract from us, you're paying for a point in time that we come in, clean. Typically, you're cleaning an area from 5 in the evening to 1 in the morning, and you're paying for a period of time to get the building ready for the next day. Robotics, there is no time limit. The second piece is in terms of predictive analytics around hard assets. So HVAC, energy, things like that. So energy costs are going up. How do you predict the behavior of the building, including the population, using sensor technology to facilitate a better energy management in terms of your overall hard assets so that you can lower your energy costs? Why are you going to run your energy unit when there's nobody in the building?
Yeah.
Why are you going to deploy your ducting system based on conference rooms and things like that if there's nobody using the conference room? So do you need to heat or cool that conference room for 24/7, 365? No, because there's nobody using it. So being more intuitive about how the buildings are being used. And then also this area around population, from a cleaning standpoint, from a facility management standpoint. Where are the people using the facility? Okay, can we darken entire floors or wings of floors where you don't have to clean, you don't have to light, you don't have to heat, cool those areas? So when you think about lighting, heating, cooling, plumbing, those are all utility costs that are significantly increasing right now. So how do we become more intuitive about that deployment?
Right.
So from an operations standpoint, I think those are the three core areas. Kayla, I don't know if I missed any.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I would just double click into the process part of it.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
robotics example that Bob gave, just to make that real, let's take a look at a lawn care example. So we support a large manufacturing space that has tons and tons of green space around it. The way that used to operate is, as Bob said, it was a scheduled window. So we would go out during a certain point in time, often when the facility wasn't open, and we would go take care of the lawn. To switch to robotics, we tried that same model where the robot would be deployed when we used to do it manually. That doesn't work because the robot cuts the grass in a different way than the human does. So really what had to happen was almost continuous deployment. So the robot would go out and take care of one area of the lawn, go back and charge. Then go and take care of a different portion of the lawn, go back and charge. And that shift in, hey, we're gonna do continuous lawn care was really what was needed to make it valuable in that deployment. When we just tried, hey, we're gonna stick it in and operate the exact same way, failed completely to get the benefits. And that shift in, hey, process may need to change is really where I've seen an unlock over the past year.
When you think about that lawnmower, one of the biggest issues that we had in the landscaping space was bee stings. A robotic lawnmower doesn't get stung by a bee.
You both have touched on the word robotics a couple times. Kayla, question for you, two-part question. How is AI powering and accelerating the use of robotics in facilities today? And the second question is, where is ABM testing out these and piloting these robots and using AI and putting AI in the hands of our operators in the facilities?
for the first question, I'd say just overall what ABM is doing with AI is really thinking about ways that we can help our clients and team members. So for traditional AI, meaning virtual only, that looks like some of the shift from reactive to demand-based that we talked about. So smart routing on the soft services side, predictive maintenance on engineering. Another important part is chatbots that support our frontline leaders. So if you think about a chief engineer and how many manuals they have, when they need to find the specific verbiage, having a chatbot that's equipped with all of their manuals, they can search and find exactly where they need to see the language.
No more table of contents.
Exactly. And simple things like that really make a big difference. But robotics is a big part of it as well. And why robotics is AI-based is because AI is essentially the software layer, and then it's embedded into a hardware layer. And that's why I'd say you see this interesting maturation curve of robotics where it's really rapid, because as AI is accelerated, that supercharges, it's not a brain, but the equivalent of the brain of the robot. But because it's not operating in this virtual environment, it's never going to be the acceleration curve that you have with AI alone. But AI's maturation helps robots get there faster.
Bob, how about jumping into where are we seeing ABM starting to further test out robotics in facilities?
I was with a large oil and gas client about a month ago, and they've got some aged, older buildings, and one of the buildings has major flood issues. And so they're working to try to fix why these leaks are happening in the building. But one of the conversations was about leveraging artificial intelligence, sensor technology to understand the behavior of what's happening in the building, and then to trigger the deployment of a robot. So can artificial intelligence tie into an autonomous scrubber to deploy the scrubber to a flood area to suck up the water almost in real time, where historically our staff typically comes in from a 5 o'clock time period to a 1 a.m. time period, or there in between. After that, there's nobody there. Something happens overnight, it won't be discovered until the next morning, or if security is doing rounds, they may catch it. Or maybe the engineers maybe have some type of sensor, but you're still waiting to deploy somebody. Now you've got a real-time deployment with an autonomous scrubber to get them over there. Granted, it's not going to be perfect because they've only got so much capacity to suck up the water, and then they've got to go back and dump the water, then come back. But it's that risk mitigation piece that's critical. And so the conversations now are how are we tying in these sensors to help deploy these robots to facilitate a better outcome and risk mitigation and solve emergencies. So it's happening now. Clients want us to be, really helping them solve some of these challenges when you think about commercial properties.
What I would just piggyback on that is, when you think about what we're doing in general, it's 3 categories. So the first one is that deployment layer, which Bob gave a perfect example for, but it becomes even more important when you think about a scrubber and a humanoid in the future. And you need to make sure that both are deployed in a coordinated manner and where you need them. So that deployment layer or orchestration layer is really important. But the second key area we're working on is what we call single use case robotics. So you heard about the scrubber from Bob. All of those are robots that are designed to do a specific activity. We call it a shootout of different robotics equipments to see what works best in different facility types.
Being nimble, I think that was an earlier point that you made.
Exactly. And then we also are working with those companies to help close gaps that those machines have, like edge cleaning. And then the third group, getting ahead of multimodal robots. So robots that essentially, and robots don't have a brain, but I'm going to use this analogy, where robots are going is hardware that's not designed for one thing, but hardware that's designed to be nimble, and you can train where AI really comes into play, train it to do multiple skill sets. So today, that looks like the robot dog, and you can teach it many, many different skills all around inspection. So are the water filters out? Is the air quality where it should be? Is there any water on the ground?
And then also being able to measure vibrations, indoor air quality, and things like that.
So I want to go into the type of AI work can help in the riskier environments. I'm thinking about where AI and robotics are helping take maybe riskier areas in a manufacturing facility, or something that's maybe less desirable, like cleaning a bathroom, and how it can improve an employee's experience. So I'd love to hear more about where you're seeing this in the real world. Maybe Kayla, you first.
What I would say is the options are really limitless. And something I do want to call out is that the use case that's going to drive the most value is very specific to the facility. Like you brought up manufacturing, and what is valuable there is going to be different than an airport, than an office environment. And even within both of those or all of those areas, it's really dependent on the goals of that particular facility, what they're trying to solve for. That said, a couple of examples that I'm excited about. One actually isn't ready for prime time yet, but it's gonna be so good when it is trash care. So when you think about trash cans, you have no idea how much it weighs. And so if you are pulling a bag and it is unexpectedly overfilled with tons of heavy stuff, especially in cafeterias where things can be wet and heavy without a lot of volume, people blow out their backs. So not good for our team members, not good for workman's comp. And so one of the things we're working with robotics companies on right now is how we can solve for that. And I know I'm a broken record with this, but it gets a little bit to process change, because the way robots are designed is different than humans. They move different. So we may need trash cans to look different in the future. Maybe they're lower, maybe they're wider, things that make it possible for a robotic arm to grab it while staying balanced. But getting out of the robotic space, a couple other examples are making sure that we have predictions for when there may be safety incidents. So you can think about areas where it's dependent on the manager and prior patterns and weather history and all of that, sending proactive alerts to our teams. Hey, remember to put the wet floor signs out, because little things like that make a big difference. And it sounds silly, but we all have 10 million things to do in a day, and a safety activity like that should be number one priority, but having that extra reminder just helps us make sure that it happens.
If you think about it, we've got to protect our employees. We've got to protect our clients. From an employee standpoint, when you tie it to workman's comp, repetitive motion. So you're talking about trash, you're talking about those things in terms of repetitive motion. So how can robotics reduce those repetitive motions when you think about vacuuming? You have an employee vacuuming like this, potentially injury, right? In terms of how they're doing that, lifting trash cans. I think about the autonomous bathroom cleaning tool that we've got, and then with the automatic scrubbers, one of the things that we looked at was the water that was left behind. So if you think about it, to Kayla's point, you go into a facility, you see the wet floor signs, now the equipment that we're seeing is really good about water reclamation, picking up the water and then dumping the water to a in-wall unit, or refilling and things like that. But now you've reduced your risk in terms of general liability from a slip and fall standpoint to protect our employees.
So I want to carry that forward a little bit here, Kayla, on predictive maintenance. Some of these large facilities with a rooftop unit cost millions of dollars, and they need to extend the life of those assets.
Absolutely.
So how is AI powering this predictive maintenance movement?
Well, I would say predictive maintenance is AI. AI is not new. So predictive maintenance has been a term that's been around for a while, and it has leveraged machine learning. And the term doesn't matter, but just know that machine learning is a type of AI. What's changed is, again, the amount of data that we now have, because I think more and more facilities leaders are aware of how important data is. So we just have more data. And the second part is AI's gotten better. And both of those things mean predictive maintenance can now truly be more predictive. In the past, it was a little bit of a hype term, I'll use that word, where people said predictive maintenance, but it truly wasn't predictive yet. We're getting to the point where it can be predictive. That doesn't mean that it's gonna pick 3 years out to the day when that asset will fail, but it'll give you a much better sense of next year, will this asset make sense to replace? What can I do to extend the life of it? What behaviors will help with that? And also warning you before you're going to have downtime. And all of those things drive this immense ROI. And my favorite part of that is the ROI looks different the longer you have predictive maintenance in play. So initially, it's this really robust energy savings, actually, because the algorithms find patterns that the human eye just couldn't. It sounds so silly, but we've never not seen it occur where we put it in place and there is simultaneous heating and cooling. And that's just burning energy in a way that's not helping you get your goals. And so we see in-year ROI, like normally 6 months in ROI, just from energy savings.
Wow.
Longer term, you have extended asset life, you have better capital planning, so you're not seeing hits in year that you didn't expect, and also lower downtime. And all of those things just help the facility run better and spend money more wisely.
Capitalize on that ROI.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Bob, we got to acknowledge that the success of AI and the use of it in a facility is not going to be evenly distributed across these different types of facilities, across different vendors, et cetera. So where are you seeing outsized success in the use of this technology? And so have you seen any surprises, actually?
Wow. So, I talked about the aviation
Right.
space, obviously just because of the volume of passengers, where the aviation industry is, and the demand management just around the response time in terms of, there's so many things that are unpredictable in aviation, whether it's weather, flight delays due to maintenance issues, but it's all about the passenger experience, right? So one of the earlier adopters is in the aviation space. We've also seen it pretty significantly in high-tech and manufacturing environments. In manufacturing, it's repetitive motion, okay? And the reason why you have things like ISO and Six Sigma, and you think about Six Sigma black belts, their full-time job is how do we do things more efficiently to drive down costs and to drive better output from a manufacturing standpoint. And so based off of studies and algorithms and really honing in on process to remove waste, it's critical in the manufacturing environments to make sure that they're driving efficiency, producing whatever they're producing, whether it's an automobile, a book, or whatever, from the most complex semiconductors, they're producing it at the lowest cost possible, right? So they've been using artificial intelligence for years to facilitate better outcomes. Well, that translates over to facilities because now they're looking at their facilities partners to say, okay, you need to have this very similar mentality because this is the way we look at our business. I was with a life science client 2 weeks ago, and that is their perspective in terms of how they're analyzing our delivery. Okay, how are you using this from a process standpoint? What are you doing to really drive out waste in terms of your service delivery model? How are you leveraging robotics and artificial intelligence to make your people more efficient, to drive down cost, to reduce risk, and to improve output? So definitely in the manufacturing space, definitely in the aviation space. And then the last piece is we saw a ramp up post-COVID with the demand management model in the commercial real estate space.
Yeah.
Because there weren't many people using the commercial real estate offices. Then there was a slow period with return to work.
Yep.
Then you saw the ramp up of return to work. Okay, we're going to have everybody come in 1 day a week to 3 days a week. But then how do we become more efficient in terms of how we're deploying that labor to both have an impact from a soft service standpoint, from a cleaning and other soft services in terms of move ad changes, things like that. But then on the hard services, so we're deploying the energy resources properly. But that was really triggered, I think, the ramp up with COVID. They were slowly talking about a demand management model prior to COVID. Post-COVID, we saw it go on hyperdrive.
Kayla, I want to jump to longer term picture.
Cool.
Where is this going? How are outcomes and ROIs being measured and then driving these new investments moving forward?
Great question. I'm just going to quickly piggyback on a couple things Bob said. One thing that I always feel is when people listen to talks about AI or robotics, they go, I'm behind. And I think people feel that way at the enterprise level. So if you're thinking about how a company is applying AI in general or within the facility, and I just want to say that I think everyone feels that they're behind, and that's natural. I think it's important to, as Bob mentioned, think about the use cases that make sense in your space. So if you're in commercial real estate and hearing about everything that aviation is doing, that doesn't mean you need to do everything that aviation is doing. It's more using it as inspiration. That said, if you're not doing anything with AI and robotics, that's probably a sign to start. But the same concept applies at the enterprise level. You hear about these very regulated industries that are super process driven, super data driven, and they are accelerating use of AI like crazy because they have all the enablers to make it happen. And I think aviation is the closest example for facilities. They have so much data, and also their ROI from demand-based servicing is so high just because of variable usage of their spaces. So I just like correlating facilities to enterprises because there's a lot of the same stratification of industries that are early adopters, but also this immense pressure that everyone feels to do something, which we all should be doing something, but it should be right-sized for our space. So I really think where it's headed is towards a facility that is data-driven. It's an ecosystem of data that is highly automated in terms of demand-based activity, both hard service and soft service. And when I say that, I think it's important to differentiate between in-day or in-night demand-based work versus ongoing optimization. So what I mean by that is if we think about soft services, in-shift demand-based work means we have certain data points coming in, like satisfaction, happy, sad buttons, occupancy data, any type of information coming in from formerly disconnected systems, so like a CMMS or a specific facility information system for that space, coming in and triggering, hey, we need to go service X space at X time. And the most extreme example that I've seen of that is companies that are ruthless about only having meetings last 50 minutes instead of an hour. And then you can trigger that the meeting is done and have someone go in and tidy up the space. But again, relies on process change because that doesn't work if your meeting runs full 60 minutes and the next meeting is starting. The overall optimization is also important because you have data to, on a periodic basis, really make that much more informed decisions about how much staffing do we need, where should it be applied, how do we think about your goals for the facility and making sure that we're achieving those.
Kayla, you said the word data several times. My understanding about the success of AI hinges on the use of data. Good data coming in means AI works well. So I would I'm making the jump, bad data in leads to AI not working well. How do we manage this conundrum here?
So AI hinges on data. So if there's bad data, and I take that as two things. One, meaning the data doesn't exist. And if the data doesn't exist, you can't do anything with it. And the other type of bad data is incomplete data, or data that's mislabeled, and all of those things can lead to the wrong output or assumptions. That said, I do want to just preface with AI is getting better and better. So even if you don't have all the data, that doesn't mean you shouldn't start. You still should start, but you should absolutely focus on the data. And I think it's a brilliant question that you brought up. And to make it tactical, there's three things that I think people need to keep in mind. The first is you have to have a unifying layer between different data sources. And so often that unifying layer is things like the facility number or the asset number. Oh. You have to be able to have something that if X information is in the BMS and the CMMS, you can tie it together and understand that it's referring to the same asset. The second piece is siloed data isn't helpful. So the more that you can unify your data systems or think about multiple data systems, the better off you'll be. And the final piece is think about more data. Like if you don't have occupancy data, it's a great thing to consider getting. And IoT devices, this is where you may hear the convergence of technology piece. IoT is getting incredibly cheap while AI is getting increasingly powerful. And those two things converge to be even more powerful because IoT gives you more data, AI makes that data more powerful. So think about what data you need. And messaging from the top matters. So if you run a facility, think about those three pieces, how they play into your yearly plan, but also message that data matters during your team meetings.
Bob, let me ask you this question here.
Yep.
This sounds like it could be a pretty significant undertaking for a client to start using data better, adopting AI, piloting robotics, et cetera. How do we go about with the client to roadmap this out and think about some short-term, medium-term, and long-term objectives to get them to where they need to be?
Yeah, first of all, committing to start.
Okay. That's easy, right?
Say, hey, we're going to start to do this. And I'll give you a very silly elementary example. I used to be an usher in my church. And when I was a kid, part of our responsibility is I had a clicker. And every Sunday, we'd have to go around and we'd click how many people were in the church because we wanted to see how many people were coming in. And then every week we'd document and we wanted to see if the population was growing in the church, right? And it was a very simple notebook and a clicker, okay? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the data collection process is as old as time can be, right? So we overcomplicate things, and one of the things that Kayla knows about me is I try to make it very, very simple and practical. Okay, how many people do you have in the building that are employees? Depending on your facility type, how many people do you have coming into the building? Okay, that's the basic principle. And when you think about facilities, even when you think about an airport, a school, how many students, how many teachers.
Starting with the basics.
It's just starting with the basics, okay? And then how many assets? Now, different organizations define assets differently,
sure,
right? But, you know, when we think of assets, what are those assets that facilitate a better, that really operate the facility, okay? Whether it's HVAC units, lighting units, fire extinguishers, rooftop units. I mean, so, you know, exits on, I mean, you can boil the ocean in terms of assets, but pick kind of the core assets that are critical to the operation of the facility. So if you've got people, you've got assets, then you begin the baseline of facilitating a good AI implementation.
Got it.
But it's not that complex, but you got to be curious about what you have, and then the use case is a big thing, right? So in education, A lot of times educations use their auditoriums for things that are happening in the community. Well, if I've got to run an auditorium for a big community event or a concert, and I've got 500 people coming in, I'd want to know that, okay? Because I've got to heat it or cool it, I've got to light it, I've got to clean it, I've got to do all these things. And then how often am I using that particular auditorium? Oh, wow, we're actually using this 15 times a year, which is why my energy costs are so high, because I'm actually using this. Am I taking that money that's coming in from the community event, if it's a paid community event, and how am I applying that to my overall cost? So, but start with the basics. It's not that complex.
So sticking with the road mapping, Kayla, what are the headwinds that are in front of us with AI, and how does that inform how we develop these roadmaps with clients?
Great question. There's several. I mean, I think the first one is that hype concepts that we talked about earlier. And luckily, I think we're shifting away from that. But Bob hit on it. I just want to double down. So a headwind is people just wanting AI for the sake of AI. And that is not the right place to start. The right place to start is data and outcomes. So think about what you're trying to solve for, like, are we capturing the money that we should be for these community events, and then apply AI. Don't just go to someone and say, hey, go put AI in, because you shouldn't be doing technology for technology's sake. The technology should help you solve the problem. So that's headwind number one. Number two is cyber. It matters that you are picking secure tools. AI opens up a lot more risk channels. It also helps protect the virtual environment more, but it opens up more risk channels. So being intentional about working with technology partners to really vet the solutions you put into play is a critical part of it. One just quick plug is for Gen AI chatbots, use the enterprise versions. That's a very, very simple way to make sure that your data is more protected. The third headwinds that I would call out is governance. So where this is headed is there will be a space in the future where there's not a thing as an individual contributor. So even an engineer that before might have been an individual contributor, they're going to have little teams of virtual teammates, or I like to call them virtual toolmates, that are helping them get the job done. And that doesn't mean that the engineer still isn't going and maintaining the asset. They are, but they'll have someone that's helping them pull information from the predictive maintenance window, or pull information from rounds and readings and help them optimize that. Governance over that matters. You need to think about an orchestration layer. You need to think about ROI and what use cases make sense. You need to think about sustainability. So tapping into or building a governance council is an important consideration.
We're going to move into our last segment of this panel here, calling it the lightning round. I have 3 questions for you, each of you, and it's going to be this quick response here. So the first one, Bob, if you had to do it all over again, what wrong turn would you have avoided?
Not capturing more data. The data is critical.
Kayla?
+1, but I'll also challenge the question, and I'd say learning's a good thing. And I think that trying to do this journey perfectly is a fool's errand. So obviously be wise, listen to best practices, get your data, but don't try to do it perfectly, because then you'll never start.
All right. Most underrated benefit of AI. Kayla, you first.
Future-proofing your facility. Like, the facilities that don't start today are gonna have a hard time catching up.
Bob?
Knowledge in terms of the intuitive nature of learning the behaviors, because the behaviors and the patterns are what's critical. I mean, that's why you want to do this. And I don't think people really talk about that in terms of the behavior of a facility or a user group, or whether it's the human experience, whether it's a passenger, a student, an employee.
Last question of the lightning round. If you could go big in one area in AI, what would it be?
orchestration layer. Like really, if we think about a facility of the future ecosystem of data, you're going to need to coordinate multiple different systems or algorithms, especially when robotics comes into play, because then you're deploying not only team members, but also robots. And so that unified orchestration layer becomes super important.
And then for me, I take it back to your second question in terms of the behavior of how things act. If I can go big in one area, it's like the understanding of how things act, because that's going to trigger labor deployments and things downstream. But the more knowledge we have of connecting things together and understanding how things act and being curious, and I think that's one of the core of AI deployment is be curious. Man, how does this work? How many people do I have coming in? Wait, what are they using this for? Wait, how are they doing this? Okay, so being curious and then using that, and that's the big piece for me, is being as curious as possible so that you can deploy better resources and drive better outcomes.
This has been great. I have learned a tremendous amount. I thought I knew a little bit about AI, and I've learned so much more through our time here. I've learned about how AI is advancing facilities. It's not just this new operating model, but it's in fact this new era of how facilities are going to run. It's moving from this clipboard managed Excel spreadsheet driven thing to now data driven decision making. It's moving from the reactive to the proactive, from these siloed environments to now this interconnected dynamic environment that facilities, and especially these new facilities that are coming up, demand. And it's not a question of do we adopt AI in these facilities, it's how, when, and what do we want our outcomes to look like. I'd like to thank my colleagues here, Bob and Kayla, for just providing such impactful and eye-opening information about how AI is advancing these facilities. And please share this with your teams. To learn more about ABM's use of AI, robotics, and technologies in our facilities, please visit us at www.abm.com to learn more. Stay tuned for our next What's Possible ABM Expert Panel series. Bye for now.